Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to our very first podcast from Peaks and Cells. We essentially talk about topics concerning analytical chemistry and molecular biology and how that applies to real life. Mm-hmm. I'm here with Scott today.
Hello.
I'm David. How's it going?
Doing good.
I see you got your air high five. I see you got your coronavirus gear.
Of course, you have to stay protected.
Yeah. So, so you see what was in the news today?
Yeah, so Spain actually returned some faulty kits back to China.
Yeah, I heard about that too. That's kind of gnarly. So, I can imagine that they would be pretty peeved because, it's allegedly the virus came from Wuhan, China, and now it seems like there's some profiteering going on that. In the midst of a global crisis. So I can understand that people are pretty peeved, but it's, what I think the goal here would be to kind of just describe what's going on in these kits and try to provide a little bit more education on what's happening and, what labs can do to kind of protect themselves. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So my first question to you is,
shoot.
What's up with these faulty kits from China?
I don't know what was the specific problem. So what these kits are, there are these kits and they can detect, if you have coronavirus in really fast, about 2 minutes, maybe up to 15 minutes. But these things happen very, very quickly because they're immunoassay based. So you can get a result very fast because you're just detecting the presence of antibodies. The antibodies that we're really looking for are IgG and IgM. So what happens is it's a kind of an immune response. So it's like, say you got the Rona, you got the Rona, and your body's gonna fight back. So it's gonna produce these antibodies. So if you're sick, the idea is these antibodies will show up. You do an immunoassay. You find those in your blood and boom, you can detect a positive. Now that's the reason why these things aren't 100% either. So the idea is they should be, a good kit should be detect positives maybe 70% of the time.
Okay.
But they should detect negatives almost 100% of the time. So if you went and you got the kit and they said, hey, you're fine, almost 100% chance you should be fine. But if they say like, well, I think you got the Rona. Well, at least you still got like a 20 or 30% chance where they're like, just kidding. So I think that's, that's still a really, really useful kit for the most part. The problem with these kits is, it was like 30% accurate. So it's almost a coin toss at that point. It's kind of garbagey. So, that's the concept behind the kit.
So why are these only work 70% of the time?
The reason why they work only 70% of the time is because if you're, like, say you're sick, that immune response could be for something else outside of coronavirus, or those antibodies might be there for another reason. So, if the coronavirus is there, you should produce these, but, you might produce them for something else as well. So that's where it's not 100%.
Okay, so I heard these kits usually work around 15 minutes on the spot. But why does it take 6 days to get results back?
Because there's two different tests. So this one is an immunoassay. So the way that it works is it's kind of like a pregnancy test. So there's this cartridge, and this cartridge has a spot where you could put the sample. There's another quadrant of the strip where you have your control enzymes conjugated there. They just have these antibodies that will help. If that sample is there, they're gonna light up. And then you have your target antibodies that capture your sample and these conjugated antibodies. So essentially it's like a conveyor belt. So this is how it works. So you have your sample. It goes into the well where you introduce the sample. There's like a nitrocellulose mesh there, and this kind of gets rid of like blood proteins, a bunch of stuff. It reduces non-specific interactions. So it's like a little nice mesh there. And then you hit it with some buffer afterwards, running buffer that's gonna, like, it's capillary action. It's gonna push the sample along the strip. Now the first section, it's gonna pick up those conjugated antibodies that give the signal. So if your sample attaches to these things, they're going to start running. But then the unconjugated ones, the ones that don't have the sample, they're going to go too. And the idea is you have these target proteins that stick onto the sample, or the antibody, or it could be an antibody. In this instance, it's an antibody, but it could also be any other compound. It could be a small molecule. It could be an enzyme. It could be a variety of things. So these things are going to be coming down this pathway, and if they attach onto the target antibody, then that's where you get like the first strip. So so that's why you see like double strips.
Makes sense.
The strip on the end is the control strip. So that's why if you see like one strip on pregnancy test, you're not pregnant. But if you see two, then you are pregnant. So the last strip is to just detect those antibodies that are conjugated that give you the signal, and they just ensure they run to completion. So that can happen very, very quickly. Whereas the one that takes 6 days, that's because that needs to be sent to the lab to do PCR. PCR is something like completely different. It's a lot more involved, but basically you're actually extracting viral DNA and amplifying the crap out of it, and then detecting that. And that requires more equipment. It's much more involved, but it's also way more accurate. So that's why it's the 6 days or however many days.
So that's why it takes so long.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's why it's taking so long.
Okay, so when it comes to these kits, don't they have usually a control on these?
Well, yeah, so that's the control strip that I was talking about, but that just kind of ensures that that those conjugated antibodies that kind of they would have like the colloidal gold or latex beads or something on that give you the signal. They're making sure that just kind of that reaction runs to completion, but it's not like a super like if there's other things that are wrong with the strip, like maybe when you were adding the conjugated antibodies, you didn't add enough colloidal gold, or the gold didn't stick too well, or like the cellulose that you had, the pore sizes were wrong and nothing was getting through, or too much was getting through. There's like a lot of other stuff that could go wrong with that strip, and that's probably where you got the high failure rates.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that can go wrong in this kit. So that control doesn't really tell you like definitively, hey, the kit's working well or not working well. It controls the reaction. A better control would be if you actually had like a lab had like a known sample, like a known control, be like, hey, I got some blood here for someone that's 100% sure has the Rona, and you got like a batch. And then, maybe out of that batch, you might test one or two and make sure like, hey, 70% of times this is positive, or at least this person definitely doesn't have it. And that should be like near 100% of the time that's showing up negative. But even then, these kits aren't 100%. So that only helps you a little bit more. But maybe those, like, you should always have as many controls as you can when you're doing lab testing. You should always have controls for lots. These are kind of individualized kits, so they're kind of tougher to deal with. But you should always get a few of these kits and just, if I were running the lab, test the batch, test a few out of every batch, test every batch that comes in. Yeah, you're going to lose a little bit of product, but I mean, on the lab's responsibility is to be like, you don't want to test like 100,000 people and be like, hey, they're bad. So I think that's something. Do you think
they'll give this another try in the future, or by tweaking some things in these?
Would you give us another try? Like, I didn't make this kit.
no. Like, let's say if they were to remake it back in China.
I think they tried
to make it work.
Yeah, I think they're trying to figure that out, and of course, like I don't think no smart company would purposely, like, if they want to be in business, they're not going to purposely make a bad product. That's death right there, right? That's death of your reputation. But I think, I think any company would try to, and I think there have been efforts. I don't know. I've just hearsay. I'm not really quite sure what's going on, but problems with these kits. I mean, these are used in testing a variety of different diseases. So, and these are all common problems. So it goes back to manufacturing and making sure these are done right. It's all at the QC level. So it's but it's kind of crazy right now because companies are expected to manufacture more and faster than they've ever been. So QC tends to go down in those cases because of the need, and as companies, you want to try to fill orders. So there's like a lot of things that are going on, especially this situation is really, really dynamic. But I think what's really important is like from a lab standpoint, what can you do to kind of protect yourself to make sure that your SOPs and your protocols are good. And I think that's what we're
SOP?
Standard operating procedures.
Okay.
So that's what SOP stands for, standard operating procedures.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, like that's kind of gives you a glimpse into the different ways we do coronavirus testing. We're probably going to elaborate on PCR a little bit more in another podcast, but for this one, we're talking specifically about these antibody kits. In my opinion, I think it's definitely worthwhile to have these. I mean, if you could detect a negative almost 100% at a time and a positive like 70% at a time, it's definitely very, very useful because you could get an answer on the spot. And that 6 days, if someone's going out infecting people for 6 days, I think that's pretty huge. So, I'd still take them, but they just have to work a lot better than 30%. So,
Sure.
yeah, and we got to get more of these things made for sure. All right, well, I think that's pretty much it for today. We'll talk more about this COVID crisis and things that are going on in the lab in subsequent podcasts. But, we're out for today.
Like and subscribe and comment whatever you need.
Yeah, all right.
Any questions?
All right, peace.